All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Daniels. I'm Chair of the Finance Committee. I'm going to call this Special Finance Committee meeting to order. To my right is Finance Committee members, Councilor Batista, Councilor Castro, Councilor Brunet, and then we have other councilors in attendance, Councilor Carabetta, Councilor Graham. We also have Mayor Scarpati. We have the Council Clerk. We have Acting City Manager Morgan, the Finance Director, Mr. Lupkus, the School Building Committee Project Facilitator, Mr. LaMontagne. We have the Purchasing Director, Ms. Petro. We have the Director of Public Works, Bob Bass. We have the Director of Parks and Rec, Chris Borden. And we also have, I'll say, the Director of Building Maintenance, Pietro Galuzzo. How about that? Or something like that. I'm pretty close. The person in charge of the buildings. How about that? There you go. And Deputy Mayor Cardona also just arrived. All right, so moving to item number 3, which is item number 14 of 31918, resolution regarding the school building committee be directed to, within existing funds, engage design professionals to provide schematic designs and provide budgets for the high school running tracks. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Okay. I'm going to simply turn this over to Mr. LaMontagne and Ms. Petro. The short of it is we have money left over from the high school construction on both Platt and Maloney. The high school tracks were not included in those projects for various funding reasons at the beginning, and we now have the opportunity to apply those funds toward those projects, and they are in need to be done. So that's the overview of the resolution, and I turn it over to whoever would like to make the presentation.
Thank you very much. A year ago, the Board of Education commissioned. A year ago, the Board of Education commissioned an evaluation of the high school running tracks and their enclosed athletic field. This evaluation consisted of an existing conditions report, professional observations, storm drainage inspection, and geotechnical investigations. In short, the tracks are well beyond their expected useful life and need a full-depth replacement, along with multiple repairs and upgrades to the existing storm drainage. Additionally, the track replacement work will cause disruption to the athletic field enclosed by the track, and further study is needed to provide options for replacement or repair of those fields. At this time, there is an opportunity to include this work as part of the existing Maloney and Platt renovation projects, and therefore leverage some reimbursement from the state. We are asking that the school building committee be allowed to engage design professionals to provide schematic designs and professional cost estimates. This preliminary design work can be done within the funding currently authorized for each project. And we're happy to answer any questions.
And so, to be clear, what the resolution is before us tonight, and we'll be back up before the City Council, is simply to authorize them to do some design work and to get cost estimates. There is no authorization for anyone to proceed until that report comes back to the City Council. Another resolution gets submitted to pursue one of those options, and then we take a vote on that and do those discussions. And Mr. LaMontagne, to be clear, that this work does not involve any additional city dollars. This is all completely covered by the funds that are still with the school building committee.
All what's in with authorized fundings for each project.
Right. And with respect to the various design options, in my mind, it's always been 3 potential options, but I want to know what the expectation is that we're going to be asking for. One is doing the absolute minimum amount of work, which is replace the tracks, and then whatever disruption happens to the field, you kind of just fill it back in and move on with life. The second is to replace the tracks, but also replace the fields with natural turf. And then the third option, in my mind, is to replace the tracks and then replace the fields with artificial turf.
Correct. And the second option you mentioned, replace with natural turf, both these fields do not have under drainage. So those of you who have walked down there, you can notice there's about a 2.5 foot crown to those fields. That's how they drain. They drain off to the track, gets the curb drain, and it's out. We'd like to lose the crown, so would all the soccer players. Football doesn't really matter. So what we'd like to do is have everybody study that. Also, Platt sits on an aquifer and we're within 500 feet of the wellhead.
Right.
So we'll work with Dennis Wise to determine what would be the best. Obviously, not using fertilizer or phosphates in those areas, would be a good thing. So we'd like to have them at this stage look at whether synthetic is a viable option and what it costs.
Okay. And as part of that, what we also have coming back to us, the associated maintenance program with each, because obviously if we put in, if we decide to go with natural turf, but it turns out it costs us $15,000 a year to keep repairing it, when if we just put in artificial turf, we're only replacing it with the technology today, maybe every 15 years with minimal maintenance. I think the city council is going to want to take what the life cycle cost of that is.
And we rely upon Chris as well because he's got the experience at Falcon. I think the major issue here, though, is if we were to move from natural to an artificial turf, it's the ability to use it year-round all the time and not let it rest. Platt is a little more visible. You can notice that for 3 or 4 months of the year, it's flagged off as we're trying to get the turf to grow back. We have a limited site, so I think it's something we'd like to look at and then have the city council decide.
And Councilor Shamrock has now joined us as well. Anyone have any questions? Councilor Castro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to Mr. LaMontagne, what is the total dollars left over from the school projects? If you-
Right now, we're on tracking about $450,000 at Maloney and about $2 million at Platt.
No further questions. Thank you.
Councilor Councilor Batista.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Glenn. So the paper that you handed out,
Yes.
this was based on a study that was done in 2017?
Yes.
This information, right? Okay. So can you tell me, both of those tracks, they weren't exactly built at the same time, right? They were, huh?
1990.
It was that long ago. That's scary.
And they were a Parks Department project.
Wow. Okay, so, and with the money difference here that's left over, so to speak, have you already thought about, if not all this money is used, what the remaining money could go toward? Are there other projects that are possibly in the pipeline?
No, as we looked at, the school building committee's been looking at doing the tracks for 2 or 3
Long time.
years. It's been a thought. It's actually in the ed spec. We did have a meeting with the Department of Administrative Services in Hartford. They looked at it and said it could be included, but before they made a commitment, they wanted to know the exact costs, and they wanted to see a schematic design. The good news is they'll include them in this project as Phase 3. That's positive, and I think it's advantageous for the city to at least look at this and then make a decision. If you were to replace these tracks on your own after we close the projects, I'm be certain there would be no funding for it.
Sure, if I may. So, but my question is, were you looking ahead, way ahead, beyond these 2 projects? Let's say these 2 things get done, and there's still money left. That's what I wanted to hear. There isn't going to be.
Now, we sort of pride ourselves on the school building committee at leaving a balance and not using it all.
Sure.
It's a matter of transparency. It's sort of like the Lincoln Project when we wanted to buy library books. We just didn't do it. We came back to the city council and made a case for it, and you said yes. So we had said at the beginning, in 2010, the tracks were not included for monetary reasons. They are in the project, but we weren't going to do them. Now we're back saying, asking you to take a look at it and make a decision.
Yep, thank you.
And I can tell you from when I was on the school building committee, when we got to the point where we knew that there were funds left over, one of the things we did was create a priority list and say, okay, there were things that had been taken out because the budgets were tight. Now that we have extra, which ones can we go back in? An example of one of them, I think, was a bunch of security cameras
Yes.
that we ended up putting back in. They weren't going to be in the budget. So the school building committee has gone down the checklist of everything else associated with these high schools that was worth putting back in, value added, put them back in, and this is the last of it.
Okay.
So, and if this isn't used, we write the check back to the state, and you cannot use these for other things in the city.
Right, thank you.
Counselor Shamrock.
Through the chair, Brian, I'm a little late and I apologize, but to Glenn LaMontagne, what is the total money left after we bonded both Platt and Maloney? No, is that the total right here?
That's what it is.
450,000 for Maloney
Yes,
and 2 million for Platt.
correct.
And what's the cost of all this?
That's what we're going to go out to look at. With the tracks, we think will be a little over $1 million. We don't know what the other pieces will be. We've done some exploratory work, but we need a professional cost estimate to go to the state before they'll sign off on this as a Phase 3. That's what we're asking for.
So this will go out to bid?
Yes. We're going to design it. Wilma will run that process.
Is this necessary, is this completely necessary that we have to do this? If we got money left, I mean, there must be some other way to appropriate the money. Right away, we're spending all the money that we have left.
I would suggest that you're not going to operate these tracks for 2 or 3 more years before you shut them down.
I've seen that track. It doesn't look that bad to me. It really doesn't.
It's in bad shape, and the curb, they no longer make the parts for the curb. We've tried to make some out of wood. If you walk the track, it was supposed to last 20 years. It's at 28 years. We're getting as far as we can.
I just worry. Any money left over, we have to spend it immediately. The track is gone now. So all the money, the $2,450,000, we just have to spend it. One of these days, I want to see taking that money and to reduce the bonding, and I don't know, I just can't see just spending the $2,450,000. It's my opinion.
And just so everyone understands the numbers, this is not $2,450,000 of city dollars.
It's bonded.
80% of this money is state of Connecticut. So there is only 20% of this. And the tracks, our schools have to host meets. We have to host communities from out of town. These, I can tell you they're not safe. I run on the tracks. They are not safe, and certainly along that inside first lane, they're simply not. And you can't have teams from other communities come, and you're not going to be able to host those in a couple years. The tracks are in that bad a condition. But just again, Councilor Shamrock, just tonight's, and I wasn't sure if you were here before when I said this, the resolution before us tonight is simply to approve them to use the school building committee money to get estimates and designs. We're not voting on the tracks tonight. They have to come back to us with the cost and the proposals. That'll be an entirely separate resolution, but this is simply for them to get us the costs and the designs. Councilor Graham?
Through the chair, yep. You answered my question in regards to if all the framework for all of these projects would fit under the budget here. But I can attest that, just the tracks are dangerous to walk on. And when you have 2 beautiful schools and then you have a turd like this, it just detracts away from the aesthetics of the school. So I know I don't get a vote, but I would certainly be in favor of it. Thank you.
Councilor Castro?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm an average runner, and I use the tracks to actually, he says on a good day, but he hasn't been able to beat me in his best day. I'm going to go on the record saying that. I do a little over 1,800 miles a year, and part of my training is on the school tracks. And I haven't been able to really use them in a while because they're not as good as they should be for an average runner. Most people that run on the tracks, they have really brought to my attention, and they have expressed concern that they are not in great condition. I think that it will be in the best interest of the city and the schools to actually explore the possibilities of rehabbing these or replacing them. Aside from the fact that we have 2 brand new high schools, as my colleague, Councilor Graham, has stated, it is also a liability. You don't want anybody to get hurt just because they're running there and the conditions are not the way it should be, and it could just come back and represent something else, you know, in the eyes of the city. So I will certainly be in support of the resolution as is stand to move forward and authorize this as is written. Thank you.
Mayor Scarpelli.
Thank you. Yes, I have no objection to this. I think it's absolutely necessary, but I just wanted to ask two questions. One on the reimbursement rate, if that's something that has changed, but I think, Councilor Daniels, you alluded to that it's not going to change, or it's an unknown?
You have different components here because you have funds that are left over, and then you have the question of if there's excess cost above this. And so, Mr. Lamontagne, you want to give us the exact calculations? I know athletic fields are usually half of your normal reimbursement rate, so if we're at 77%, the state would ordinarily only give you 38%, but
They'll commit to 38.57 because they'll hold the 77, but the 77% was not listed for the tracks in the implementer bill that went forward. We had the gyms, the natatorium. There was a lot we got, but the tracks weren't. So we went up and we had that clear discussion with them. I would also like to thank Representative Altabello, who helped organize that meeting for us at the state. They were very clear. We would get 50% of our normal rate. It's 38.57%.
and how would that, and this applies toward that, or is that with respect to the excess?
That would apply. What they're going to do is they're going to determine the cost of the tracks. Let's say $1 million to make this easy, $1 million at each one. They would reimburse us at $385,000 out of that $1 million that we spend for what's reimbursable. For instance, we're not charging ourselves a building permit. In the past, if we did, that wasn't reimbursable by the state. I think there'd be very little that's not reimbursable here because it's all on site.
Right.
And it's pretty simple and straightforward.
All right, thank you. And my last question is, you mentioned prioritizing a list from the school building committee. I would assume the conversations have already taken place with the Board of Education to make sure that the Board of Ed is also on board with this proposed plan, and they're in favor of this as the next top priority as well.
Yes. Mike Grove would have been here to attest to that. He had a family medical emergency, so he's not here. Yes, the Board of Ed's on board.
And the Board of Ed also has a member, just like the City Council does, on the school building committee. And so when it came time to prioritize what could be done with the additional funds, everything has always been done hand in hand with the Board of Education on this project.
Thank you.
And I think there was a point made earlier. These are going to have to get done. This is no different than when we were looking at the high schools. We're either going to do it now and get the state to significantly participate in the cost of doing it, or we're going to do it 5 years from now and pay for the whole thing ourselves. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it. Councilor Brunei?
Yes, through the chair. How much is it estimated that the planning phase will cost? And will that?
Each one would be less than $100,000. They don't know. Wilma will negotiate a good price for us. I'm sure we'd go out, but we think the total cost for architectural engineering on the entire project would be about $100,000. So professional cost estimate through schematic and some testing and boring, probably less than 50 at each, but in that range.
And that would be consumed from this 2.45 million?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Shammack?
Yeah, through the chair, Brian. To Wilma. Wilma, is there any possible way that we can give a little preference to a Meriden contractor to bid on these? I know you have to go with the lowest bid, but didn't we give preference to workers at the Platte Maloney High School when we built those buildings?
We did, but this, Councilor Shammack, is just for the study, so we'll be looking for an architect or an engineer. We wouldn't be bidding this till we came back to the council for permission to bid.
But when it comes down to bidding, is there any other way that we can preference Meriden construction workers?
Not with state money unless there's a PLA on the project.
Thank you, Wilma.
I second Councilor Shammack's motion for a PLA on this project. We're now finally all on the same page. It takes time, but we're there. Does anyone else have any comments? All right, does anyone from the public wish to speak on this? Going once, going twice, closed. All right, Mr. Lupkus?
If I can, just to follow up on this, one last item to consider, although I don't consider it a major obstacle. Like we had mentioned, right now, we're getting some state reimbursement on this. If we went out on our own, we would not be getting that reimbursement. The one thing that this will do, because the state is considering this phase 3 of the school projects, all of that money that I had to borrow, that $20 million for retainage that we've talked a couple times, will not be coming back until this whole process ends. Again, the money's out there, it's bonded, we're paying for it anyway. It'll just be longer, and it would make it possibly, depending on cash flow, that I'd have to go to market one more time before that money comes back. But just so you're aware of that, because we've talked about that surplus money.
And that's a good, well, just for factual information, this goes back to the city council next Monday, gets voted on, let's assume it passes. It's now in the school building committee's hands until it comes back with the designs and the cost estimates. What do you anticipate that timetable being before, when should the city council expect to see it back? How about that, simple?
I sat with Wilma and we did a bit of a timeline. We would hope to be back in September to the city council for full funding at that point.
Okay.
We want to get this all done. Right now, we've developed a timeline that has construction ending in November of 19, and this is very, very aggressive.
That's next year, basically finishing up over the summer of next year.
No, doing it during the summer next
That's
year.
what I'm
finishing
right,
in the
that's
fall,
what I'm saying,
yeah.
right. Now you've got that 4 months or whatever, you start a little early to get it done during the summer of next year. So it's as fast as you can possibly do this. All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you very
both
much.
of you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the non-action agenda items we have tonight, which are budget overviews from various departments. We have facility maintenance, Parks and Rec, and Public Works, and without objection, I'd like to start with Mr. Galuzzo at facility maintenance. Seniority, folks.
I think this is Chris. I'd like Chris to speak, but if Chris has any question, or you guys have any question, I'll take it over.
If Chris is wrapping it into Parks and Rec, that may be a whole different thing. All right,
Oh, I
then,
don't want to steal the show.
as I have done on other nights, though, we have Public Works, Parks and Recreation, Facilities and Maintenance. I leave it to all of you to decide what order you would like to do it in. How about that? So whatever you have teed up.
Bob, you want to go first, or? Sure, that's fine. That's fine.
Yes, I will. Okay. Good evening. My name is Bob Bass, Director of Public Works for the public. In front of us is the engineering budget that I presented to the city manager and his changes. If you review it, the changes are very minimal between what I proposed and what the city manager proposed. I have no issues with what he's put in front of us. I can make those line items work for us. If anybody has any questions on this budget or any of the others as we go, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Do you,
Okay. Yes.
Mayor Scarpati?
yeah, I guess, Mr. Chairman, as a point of clarification, do you want to go slide by slide on this? While that we have the numbers in front of us, I have a question.
I mean, and what I would recommend, as we've done on other nights, the presentation can just keep going unless someone raises their hand. If I don't see it, just yell it out. I'll do my best, but I think it's easiest to do it slide by side because the topics will keep changing. So, do you have questions on this slide, Mr. Mayor?
Item or line number 189, the seasonal workers. I see that, Bob, you looked to put something in. The city manager had taken that out. wondering what type of impact that might have on your operations this coming year and what that proposal was initially for.
Okay, that line item was originally for hiring a college student to assist with our call before you dig mark-out person. The city manager and I discussed this during the budget process, and knowing that we were going into an extremely tight year, I put the offer on the table to not bring that in as a position for this coming summer. We've lived without it for all these years. It just makes it a little bit tougher for my guys, but again, I try to have some sense of responsibility for the financial situations that we're in. So figured $9,000 here, $9,000 there helps the city in the gross sense.
And Mr. Mayor, I just want to point out that the column with the 9,600, and it was last year's budget, it's not the department request column.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Gotcha.
So this is just a comparison between last year's budget and the recommended.
All right. And so then I have one more question, and I see the snow and ice budget going up 75,000. I know that's an ongoing issue that we have pretty much every year about what's a realistic number. And I'm seeing 750 in front of us this year. If you could tell us how we fared. I know we were, I guess, ahead of the curve going into this last month, but where we're at now in that line, and if 750 to you is a comfortable number.
Yes, 750 I think will be a good starting point for us. As far as where we stand right now, based on my projections, we have spent out the door $643,000. I have approximately $10,000 of bills that are still waiting to be paid, which would take us up to approximately $653,000. Which would leave me about $22,000 of funds left. Again, this is my projections based on the latest information. It is my recommendation at this time that we take a look at the budget again in another week or so, and I work with the finance director, and if he and I are both in agreement that whatever funds we see are left, that we take that amount of money, which at this point in time is roughly $22,000, and we purchase additional salt. We have a phenomenal price of $60.10. We have communities next to us. In fact, Cheshire is one of them who was paying over $75 a ton for straight salt. I think next year we'll see the price go up. At the $22,000 I have left, I can buy about 363 tons of salt, and I think that's a good stock for us to have in our back pocket. So as of right now, it looks like we're going to be able to finish this year very close to budget based on my projections. We never know what next year is going to bring. We could find that salt, like I said, to go up to $75 or $80. So I think the $675 or the $750 we're going up to makes perfect sense because it's such a gamble on what snow will do. One thing that we have done to try to reduce our costs is we've changed our snow plowing operations a little bit in a way that we can try to reduce the number of contract drivers that we have out there, such as Pulaski, La Rosa, which are charging up to $350 an hour. So we're trying to reduce that, so we've made a few changes. We also are very grateful to the Department of Parks and Recreation and Public Utilities. Without their staff, we would not be able to plow as efficiently as we do. But we do have a downfall is that during the day, particularly with the Department of Public Utilities, because they have their jobs to do, I have some sections that do not have two drivers in them during the course of the day. So some streets take longer to get plowed. I think at some point in time, we need to look at increasing my staff. At one time, the Highway Department had 42 gentlemen in it. I have 17 now. And that's a huge drop over the last 25 years. If we had a couple additional bodies, that would help us not have to rely so heavily on the other departments, and I'd be able to have more drivers in more sections on a constant basis, and that would be a benefit to all of our residents. So I realize now this year is not a year for that, but I think it's certainly something that we must keep in focus, that at some point in time we need to increase this department in order to keep up with what's going on in the city.
Thank you.
Councilor Carabetta?
Yeah, through the chair, I do have a question. Bob, how is it up to 350? I thought if it's contract, is it already negotiated before?
I have different prices depending on the contractors. A couple contractors have bid $250, some have bid $350 an hour. So it depends on which contractor's on the road. Pulaski charges me $250, La Rosa's at $350. So that's why I said up to $350, depending on which contractor's out working for me.
So I just wouldn't understand why Pulaski wouldn't come in at 350 too, if you're willing to pay that high. You know what I'm saying?
Greg is a very small operation. He has a couple of trucks, and he has less overhead, obviously, than someone such as La Rosa, so he can charge at a lower price also.
So, and you only have two contractors?
I have two contractors.
And how many bids do you usually get in?
We usually get 3. And one contractor wasn't able to meet our bidding requirements this year, so we're down to two contractors. We were fortunate that we'd have a real brutal winter. I was able to work with that limited supply rather well. But again, if I had additional staff in-house, then I can do, more with my own staff and not have to rely on outside contractors.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And a comment, too. First of all, I had so much fun plowing snow with your driver, who I knew. But what came up, and it goes along with your request down the road or whenever we can, in getting extra staff, that night, I believe it was 4 drivers called out sick.
Yes.
One, right?
Yes.
One, and he's getting, the calls while I'm in the truck. And I heard them say, I'm throwing up all over the place. And so Robbie goes, go home.
Yes.
And so you're put in that position where you don't have a deep bench, It's
Correct.
like, that was tough. So the work that you did, I don't think the public understands that
No.
when that happens, you're really short.
Correct.
And things happen. So I appreciate that.
I'm very fortunate that I have guys who are very dedicated to being out there and doing this under all types of conditions, whether it be just a straight snowstorm or a situation where you have ice thrown in there or sleet. It's not easy to be out there for 20, 25 hours, pushing the snow off to the road and hopefully not having residents out there where we have snowmobilers, we have people on quads, all of this that we have to be cognizant of. So it's not an easy job. And I wish the public would recognize that these guys, they're putting a lot into this to get the roads clean. And I do drive in the other communities after we have a snowstorm to compare, and generally we are well ahead of our adjacent neighbors, Southington, Cheshire, and Wallingford.
And one more comment, if I may. The other comment is that I knew this happened, that people just don't get their cars off the road. They walk in the middle of the road, and he's trying to plow.
Yes.
So that's more time it would take because they're, bobbing and weaving.
Correct.
Waiting for the police to come to ticket and tow the car. And it's unfortunate that the public doesn't really get that. Some of them, not everybody.
Correct. We do
Some.
tag and we do tow. We've tagged and towed up to
Yeah.
over 100 vehicles in some storms. And so they're paying the fine of the ticket as well as they're paying the wrecker. They could be paying up to $250 for being left out on the street. And that's a sizable piece of price for someone to not take their car off the road for, 10 or 12 hours.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
In the garage. Again, the city manager and I went through everything, and the changes that he's put forth are very, very small. I have no issues with moving forward with what has been presented to me by the city manager. Public Works. Pardon me, they're a little bit out of order compared to what's up on the board. Okay. What item do you have circled, Mike?
The position change?
Oh, yes.
Highway.
All right. I made a couple position moves. I took a staff member from the bulky waste department and I put them into the Public Works department because really it's all part of the same organization, same operation. From a manpower estimate, we do person down at the transfer station will work up a highway, person at highway will work down at the transfer station. So it just made more sense for me to take his salary and put it into the Public Works line item, and we took that out of the bulky waste transfer station. So there was zero total budget change, but the money was just moved from one division to another. That's all that was. Other than that, again, the city manager and myself are pretty much in agreement on everything here, so we can move forward with that department as well.
Does that 97, well, it's almost 97.5, $97,000 represent one position?
It represents one position and salaries. We had salary increases from because there was the unionized negotiations, so that
Contractual. Got
obviously
it.
increased the salary overall.
Thanks.
Yep. Traffic. Again, very, very small changes up and down the entire budget line item. I have no problems living with the numbers that have been placed in front of me. Transfer station. Okay. In the top line, which is the transfer station itself, the only line item there that there's any significant difference between what I had requested and what the city manager proposed was in the vehicle maintenance line item, which is 3355, 352. I had requested $30,000 and the city manager's recommending 18. I've had some larger expenses of late because we have the Beast, which grinds up our trees, and it's a little bit pricey to replace it, the cutting edges and the screens, but I've been able to help Chris with great removal of many, many piles of trees that he's had that benefit my project, which is the sidewalk project. So I think that number of 18 will be tough to meet next year. Certainly we can start with that, but I just want to know to everybody that that's a line that could possibly go over. But we'll start out with that number and we'll do our best to maintain that. In the next line, which is the inner city trash and recycling, the numbers that are there represent contractual obligations that we have with the dumping fees and the contract with the vendor, which is All Waste. There's nothing I can do about those. That's what we have. The dumping fees, that's a best guess. If we produce more garbage, that will go up. If we produce less, that will go down. But that's based on some historical data and what we will see for the upcoming year's dump fees. Last but not least, we have the transfer station, which we have reduced. If you take a look at line item 194, we have reduced that by the $79,000. That was where I moved that person's salary into 3354, which is highway. So we had an offsetting cost right there. Everything else the city manager left as is. But what this now leads to is looking at this year's budget a little bit, before I go through the presentation. I'd like to talk a little bit about this year's. As I said earlier, I reduced a couple line items in order to try to save the city a few dollars. Generally in May and October, we have the bulky waste free day at the transfer station. I just wanted to put it out on the table that that's a $15,000 expenditure. If we're trying to help with some of our financial impact for this year, this may be a very small way. I realize that the residents do look forward to it. They do find it helpful. But if we're looking to cut some costs, this is an immediate spot that we maybe forego it in May as a way to save the city $15,000. So that's just something I want to throw out concerning this year. Certainly, the sooner the council could make a decision on that, it would be greatly appreciated, because I already have residents sending me emails. When is the free day going to be? So if the council would consider that and get back to the city manager or myself rather quickly, I would appreciate that, so I can either inform the public that yes, it's going to be there, or no, it is not. But again, I just wanted to offer, here's a way to try to save a few dollars for.
Well, right
the
now, it's in there.
It
So
is in
unless
there,
the
that
city
is correct.
councilor puts in a resolution to change it, it's not going to get you. We can't just tell you tonight, do this or do that.
Correct.
And just my view of it is, the offset is, I know, because I use it, there is an enormous amount of bulky waste that gets taken out of the city on those days. The argument could be they'll pay for it anyway at some other point, but maybe they won't. I'm not saying how I would vote on it, but.
Correct.
Unless someone puts in a resolution,
Correct.
assume it's going forward.
I understand that, but again, I felt it was my obligation to at least bring it forward to show that, you know, we are trying to think of ways to try to help save the city some dollars and cents. It's not a lot, but again, it was something that I wanted to put forward to you. And I wasn't expecting any type of decision tonight because I knew it would have to go through full council, but as finance, I thought you could either say, yeah, we think it's a good idea, or no, we don't think it's a good idea, and then I could work from there. So that's all this was a sounding board, nothing more than that.
My guess would be if you don't see a resolution go in the next week or so, that
That's fine.
there's no interest in eliminating it.
That's fine.
That would be my guess. So if anyone has an interest in doing it as a city councilor, get the resolution in sooner rather than later.
Okay,
To Mr. Lowell, Majority Leader.
okay.
Please, continue on. What's
Okay,
next?
just very quickly, I just wanted to run through a few facts and figures for you. Okay, Mike, thank you. That's just the staffing that I have. It's 38 people for the entire Public Works Department. At one time, like I said, the Highway Department itself was 42 people, so my entire Department of Public Works is smaller than what Highway was at one point in time. So there certainly has been a significant reduction in the manpower in the Department of Public Works. This just gives you an idea as to the square footage of sidewalks that we have done each year. The blue represents city-funded sidewalks, and the yellow represents CDBG. On an average, we do about 16,000 square feet of sidewalks with city funds and about 7,700 with CDBG funds.
Mr. Chairman,
Next, we have our yes, I'm sorry.
through the chair to Bob or Mike, what do we currently have budgeted for sidewalks this year in our funds?
In the capital equipment, or the capital, we have, I believe it's $350,000 for sidewalks, if I remember correctly.
And I also believe that there is an unspent dollars from CDBG, which amounts about 300,000.
I'm sorry, for city sidewalks, we have $300,000 funded for this year. The CDBG, I requested $125,000. That's an up and down number.
Correct.
I don't know how many organizations applied for that, so I don't know if that's going to be a solid number or if that may float up or float down.
I mean, historically, it probably has, but if there is an unspent amount from CDBG from previous fiscal year that you haven't used yet because you haven't gone out to bids or
Correct.
other reasons?
Any CDBG funds that were left from last year, we roll them forward into this
that's-
year, and we do the same thing next year. So at the end of the day, we try to spend right down to the last penny if physically possible.
Fair enough. Thank you.
This slide shows us the various types of pavement treatments that we have used over the years, which includes the mill and overlay. That's your standard mill and overlay where you take off 1.5 inches or 2 inches and you replace it. We have reclamation, which is something that we did on Cariati Boulevard. That's where you actually take the existing pavement and the existing subsoils and you grind them up, reshape the pavement, and pave it. Hot in place thin, this is where we actually just heat the pavement in place, and then we overlay it with NovaChip. That is what we did on Research Parkway a couple years ago. Next treatment is called SAMI Micro. This is where we actually do a micro mill where we take off approximately 1/2 inch of the existing wearing surface, and then we put the thin overlay on top of it. And then we have the micro mill and the NovaChip, which is very similar to the SAMI and the Micro. Our pavement treatments these are just preservation. They're not total reconstruction. So what we're doing is we're putting on a very good ACE bandage around the injured, but we're not rebuilding the road like we should, which would be to take out all the sub-base material where it's not sufficient, put in new sub-base material, put in new drainage. This is a way of trying to extend the dollars that we have. As I've said before, and I will say it again, our consultant keeps reminding me you should do at least $2 million a year in pavement work. We do about $800,000 a year after we pay for officers that are on duty, we pay for our testing and everything else. So we're really behind the 8 ball on where we should be with pavings.
And Bob, just because this is televised, You know, we get questions all the time about different streets in town, but there are a number of them that are state streets that the state is in charge of fixing, but the city is not.
That is correct.
All right, so can you just list for the public the major streets in town that are within the state's jurisdiction
Sure.
to fill the potholes and repair the
Sure.
streets?
So we have all of Route 5, which is Broad Street, from the Wallingford Town Line to Berlin. We have River Road. We have Main Street in South Meriden. We have Hanover between the Pizza House all the way out to Old Colony. We have Old Colony from the Wallingford Town Line all the way up through the intersection of Hanover, where it actually is Cook Avenue. Then we have the Chamberlain Highway from West Main Street all the way up to the Berlin Town Line. And then there's a small section of West Main Street from Cook Avenue to the Chamberlain Highway, which are state roads. So they're the ones that would be responsible for the replacement of signals that are damaged, pavement marking issues, sign issues, as well as the potholes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we have crack sealing. This is just another way of preserving our roads. By sealing the cracks, less water gets in, you have less pavement failure, which obviously will save us some dollars down the road. Average, we do about 67,000 linear feet a year. We've worked off of the state bid over numerous years. On some of these pavement treatments that we've done, we've actually worked with other communities so that we have a larger number of square feet, which obviously will bring the cost down for us. Next, we have permits that have been issued by engineering. We average over 400 permits a year. These are permits for places like Eversource to work in the street, Cox Communications, any vendor who wants to work within our street right away. Call before you dig requests. Again, this all has to do with people that are working within the right of way. On average, we put out over 2,900 call before you dig tickets a year. The last couple of years have been very large. If you take a look at 16, we put out 3,600, and in 17 we did 3,300. A lot of this is driven by what Eversource has been doing. If we all take a look, Eversource has invested a lot of money into the city of Meriden, and every time they dig a hole, we need to mark out where our utilities are, water, our gas, and our water, our sewer, and our storm drain. So this is where I was going to have the person be assisted during the summer months, but again, I was looking at trying to help reduce our fiscal costs a little bit.
And Bob, maybe you could just, we had one other issue in the last year, which was we had a number of streets that you were going to pave that got dug up, and then the paver got stuck out of state, and we were getting calls. I know Council Brunet was getting buzz, and I was getting buzz constantly because there were roads in town that were just
Correct.
completely dug up, and we were somehow at the end of the list. And so what have we done to try to prevent that from happening again this year?
I can't control. Some of that was pure weather related. The vendor that was doing that work actually presented me with a calendar showing me his job that he had out of state and the number of days that he lost days on the road in Massachusetts where he could not pave. And for him to try to demobilize his activity in Massachusetts, bring it down here for maybe a day, pay to haul the material all the way back up to Massachusetts was very costly. Anytime you pave, it's a crapshoot because you could mill today and then you could end up with multiple weeks of rain, and there's nothing I can do about that, and this is what happened to them in Massachusetts. There was a slight side benefit to this, believe it or not, is that it led to us finding some bad areas that we were able to fix before they paved it, so we were able to make a better surface at the end of the day. Yes, it was a nuisance for our drivers, I will not deny that, but we've already been in contact with our vendors, and we think we're going to do a little bit better this year, but again, Mother Nature controls us. If it rains, I can't do anything about that. Next is our solid waste that is delivered to Covanta. If you look at 2016 versus 2017, there was a huge decline, almost 8,000 tons. Covanta made a business decision on their part to stop accepting commercial material at the facility in Wallingford, so that is why there was a big drop in the number of tons of material that was taken there. Since that decision was made, they've changed their mind, and now they're back taking commercial. They've realized that it really didn't benefit them to the degree that they thought it would. So commercial is back in Wallingford. Bulky waste and scrap metal. The taller column there is the bulky waste that we collect. On average at the transfer station, we collect 565 tons of bulky waste, and we collect about 75 tons of scrap metal. That would be a bicycle, an old refrigerator, a stove, anything along that line. Job orders. This is what the guys do up at Michael Drive. On average, we do 835 job orders a year, and that's with 4 mechanics trying to take care of that. So that's taking care of lawnmowers, weed whackers, snow blowers, cars, trucks, paving box, rollers. That's all of that stuff that we take care of. We do not take care of police vehicles and fire vehicles or the Board of Ed. However, this past summer, we did provide some mechanical work for the police department while they were looking for a new mechanic. So again, that's a lot of work, 835 job orders, but a job order may include that you're doing a new rear end, a lube oil and filter, putting new tires on. So that job order may have 8, 9, 10, 12 different items. So these guys are stretched to the max. There's just no bench strength, as Councilwoman Batista alluded to earlier. Fuel dispense. I'm sorry.
Yeah, through the chair, just a quick question. Would it be more efficient to centralize that in the city as opposed to having, like, the police department and the...
Space.
Space.
I have 3 bays for small vehicles, which would be your pickup trucks and your cars, and then I have 5 bays for the large vehicles, such as your dump trucks, the bulky waste truck, the paving box. By bringing additional people up there, if we were to bring the fire department or the police department up to say, that's going to occupy 1 full bay all the time on me, maybe even 2, because they generate so much because they're running 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365. So I think to try to bring them up, it could actually maybe put a crimp in both departments. And I know the fire department has their own mechanic, and he's got a very good setup over at Chamberlain Highway, if I remember correct. So if we were going to rebuild the Public Works garage, let's say we had a clean slate, I would absolutely agree with you that it would make sense to put all the mechanics up there, but build a bigger development that would fit it all.
Thank you.
And as we replace our fleet, and it seems as though since 2015, since 2014, we've seen that number somewhat decrease. But as we replace our fleet, shouldn't we continue to see that number either decrease or at some point stay at a somewhat manageable size?
I don't think you'll ever see anything significantly decrease because, so this year we bring in a new vehicle. You're still going to have a whole bunch of older vehicles down the road. You may lose 1 old Ford pickup truck, let's say, but you still have 9 others that are still maybe equally as old. So you're never going to get rid of all of the old equipment that sits in the city. We do everything we can to keep these things on the road.
I understand that, but I'm saying from 2017, 643 job orders to 2014, where you had 918. That's a pretty large swing, and I give you kudos for that. But are we seeing any savings in the budget from that?
No, because what happens is the parts keep getting more and more expensive as we go along. More expensive to buy that rear end, more expensive to purchase belts and hoses and everything else. Unfortunately, just like the rest of us, when we go to do our own lube oil filters on our cars, there's generally a change every couple of years. You see, instead of paying $29.95, now you're up to $34.95. So it's the same thing with us. The parts just keep getting more and more expensive. So I don't see we're going to be able to get a significant reduction in the overall cost. It just doesn't work.
To have almost zero reduction with just about 300 job orders, when in 2011 we were at 963, so you're over 300 down from 2011 to 2017.
Correct.
So to say that no, that we're not going to have a savings. But I get that things are expensive, and I get that over time, yes, it becomes harder to find parts and things need to be specially made, and I totally understand all that. But
right.
To say that with that much of a decrease in such a short time frame, that there's not going to be a decrease in costs.
Right. But those job orders also include something, let's say, as simple as a trailer that Chris may use to haul his lawnmowers from point A to point B. It just needs a new tire put on it. It still rotates into a job order.
So then I don't mean to cut you off, but I would then question the validity of this chart and wonder what it is we're looking at.
I can go back and look at it again if you would like. I have no problems with,
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're looking at apples and
Okay.
apples, that's all.
I'll go back and look at it again. I have no problems.
Thank you.
Yep. This is the fuel that is dispensed at both Michael Drive and the Water Pollution Control Facility, which is over on Evansville Avenue. On average, we dispense 74,000 gallons of diesel fuel, 66,000 gallons of unleaded fuel, and equal to 2,030 gallons of CNG. Next, we have just a little tidbit of numbers. We do over 3,000 potholes a year. We replace over 80 catch basin tops a year, and we maintain over 720 signs per year. And then last, we just have a few photos for,
Yeah, just a quick question on that chart. What did the CNG, what does that stand for?
compressed natural gas. We have a series of vehicles, they're mostly Hondas, that run on compressed natural gas. We put a fueling station in several years ago. We got a grant for that. We had to just pay for the site work for it. The fuel generally is less expensive than unleaded fuel. Right now, they're running at about the same cost, but if we continue to see the price of unleaded fuel go up, the price of the natural gas will certainly outweigh the increase in the unleaded. All the vehicles that we purchased were done through state grants where they paid for the upfit from a unleaded vehicle to a compressed natural gas. So when we bought the Honda Civics, they were roughly, we'll say, $20,000. The state paid for the $7,500 upcharge on the CNG equipment.
And then one more question. I don't know if we have any newer diesels. Do we have any newer diesels that you have to put the DEF in?
No,
We do not yet.
no, we do not.
Okay. All right, then, thanks.
You're welcome. One more, Mike, please. Just a couple photos. This is the transfer station. I think everybody's seen this before. This is before the solar farm was put in. It's actually rather impressive with what we do down there between electronic recycling. We now recycle mattresses and box springs as long as they are relatively neat and clean and not frozen or totally destroyed, as well as we generate mulch and topsoil for the residents. So we do quite a bit on a very small site. Just our fueling station, which was replaced about 1.5 years or so ago. Those are two 10,000-gallon above-ground storage tanks. They were put in by United Concrete of Wallingford. That's our CNG fueling station, Councilman Carabetta. Again, that was all paid for by a grant from the state with the exception of the concrete pad and the bollards. We had to do that as site work. That's the beast. That's the best friend that we have right now. As I said, we've helped the Parks Department quite a bit reduce their pile of trees that they've had sitting behind their facilities up on Cahill Road, or Cahill Drive, I'm sorry. That's our brand new street sweeper. That works very well with the other new machine I bought a couple years ago. Between that doing the first sweep and the other machine, which is more of a vacuum driven, being able to pick up quite a bit of the debris off the road. It's been a very good asset for us. It's already been out on the road this year. That's my multi-purpose tractor. That will allow me to mow the banks of the dams that I'm responsible for, as well as Research Parkway. It was a John Deere that came in extremely handy for us. And that's just the general feat. The truck on the left is a replacement of a truck that was almost 40 years old. We refer to that as the bread truck because it looks like an old-fashioned bread truck. You'll see two wing plows, which are the second and third vehicles. We divided the city up a couple years ago. One works the east side of town, one works the west side of town on the major roads. That was part of us trying to improve our capabilities to plow snow. The second vehicle from the right was the brand new truck that just came in about 2 days before this photo was taken. And then the last one is the all-purpose tractor. And with that, that concludes that. Excuse me, are we supposed to be talking about CIP tonight as well? Do you want to do it right now or after Chris's? Okay.
if I may, through you.
Yes, Bob, we're doing CIP.
Okay, this is just a comment going back to the mayor's question about that chart. Would it be fair to say that there's a direct correlation with the number of job orders that were done in 2011 with the number in 2017 based on staff? That you had more staff?
It's a possibility. I would have to go back and take a look at
Yeah.
everything that was going on in a couple years back.
Because that's like 6 years, so
Correct.
you were down staff now more than you were then, so there's more people. Just one,
Yep, I will go back and
I'm
double
not sure
check
when
that.
we cut traffic staff, but since 2011, but
Yeah, I did lose a mechanic during the budget crisis, so I will go back and
I'd
double
love to
check
know when that
those.
was. Thanks.
Okay, you want to go ahead and do your CIP?
Sure.
This is on page, what, 13, what, starting on
13-3.
13.3?
13-3. First item is the city road reconstruction. We're looking at $475,000 as the city portion, and then $613,000 coming in from the LoCIP funding. That gives us the $1 million that's generally presented to me every year. Citywide sidewalks is $300,000. That was actually a drop from $350,000. Again, looking at the self-imposed bonding cap that the city has, we had to look at some areas to reduce funding, and that was one spot that we looked at. I have guide rail replacement in for $460,000. Of that, $380,000 is going to be reimbursed from the state of Connecticut. A consultant gave us an idea as to the way to replace our guide rail that we presented to the Department of Transportation, and they liked the idea, so we were fortunate enough to get a grant, like I said, for $380,000. We're going to do $460,000 of guide rail replacement, where it will be the old wood post and the wood cable. We're looking to remove almost all of that in the city and put modern style metal beam rail. Miscellaneous sidewalks repair is $75,000. This was a slight reduction over the normal $100,000. This is where we work on the neighborhoods to remove and replace the trees, very similar to what we did on Isabel and Carriage Drive East. We are now in the Catherine Drive neighborhood. Chris and his crews have already removed all the trees in the neighborhood, and I have a contractor coming in to start doing the horizontal slicing to remove the small deformations between the adjacent sidewalk pieces, and we'll be putting that out for full construction later this season.
Okay, hold on, Counselor Shamrock.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. To Mr. Bass, going back to sidewalks for a minute, I contacted a person that had a problem with this sidewalk. That 60/40 is still in effect for homeowner and city?
Yeah, yes, it is. It's 65/35, and
Yeah,
there,
60 right.
there is a cap on how much the city will actually pay. I believe it's up to $5,000 the city will pay on a residential piece. The best person to check on that with is going to be the city planner, and I can certainly check and verify the total dollar amount, and I can get back to you on that.
You know, the problem that I see, though, Bob, is the fact that most homeowners don't know about that program. Is there any way we can let the people out there know that there is a program out there, 65/35? He was unaware of it till I mentioned it.
I can certainly
I
bring.
don't know how you can enlighten him that there is a program out there like that.
Probably the easiest way would be for Mr. Seal to work with the IT department to put something on the city's website.
I think we have to do that.
As an avenue to look, and then maybe at the next Parks and Public Works meeting, we could just kind of talk a little bit about it so the word starts to spread a little bit more. We certainly can,
That's fair
can
enough.
look at that.
and there's a cap on that amount, though, that
That
the
is-
city
that is-
would pay.
That is correct. I believe that
It's
this,
budgeted X amount, and when that's gone, it's gone.
that's correct. That's correct.
And every
But-
town, I'm sorry, not every town does it, but, you know, most towns do have that. Because I think, generally speaking, the public really doesn't understand also that they are responsible for the sidewalk.
They are responsible for the maintenance of
They
their
are.
sidewalks.
And that, too, has to be explained.
Next, I have citywide drainage. This is the replacement of damaged culverts, catch basins, head walls, anything along that line. That's a slight reduction from 50 to 25. I had a few dollars left in this year's budget, so I did not request the full 50. downtown improvements, $175,000. That continues with any of the activities, the new traffic signals downtown, which we have to pay for the design, the removal of the brick sidewalks on the side streets. We're going to start looking at that. Those have not been touched. We're strictly working on West Main and Colony. Contractor should be back out mid-April to finish doing the bump out removal and the sidewalk replacements downtown. As well as we have a new contractor who's going to be putting sidewalks in from Washington all the way up to Camp Street on Colony, as well as finish the sidewalks around the Meriden Green. We skip down to the MS4 drainage requirements. This is a storm drainage issue where we have to meet new criteria that DEP has put out. We have to map all of the catch basins and storm drainage system in the entire city. We have to do new evaluations. It's another mandate, which we don't have any choice but to keep moving forward. We've already started it. We had money in this year's fiscal budget, and we're continuing to move forward with that.
So, Bob, on that point, I don't know if this is the same thing, but I know up in my neighborhood, people were doing all this surveying, and then I started getting calls saying, okay, what kind of work is the city doing up here? And then I think I buzzed you, and you said, no, all we're doing is as-built mapping. And is that this?
That was different. As-built mapping on that was, that subdivision never had its final as-built done as far as water, storm, and sanitary. So that was to come up with the final plats that were necessary to go on the land records. This is now the guys are going to be out there locating the catch basins, but they're not going to be surveying anybody's driveway, a house location, or anything like this. This is strictly going to be locating the storm drains.
So you're not going to see the tripods?
You'll see them out there because they're going to end up doing survey, or they may have a backpack and with a little hamburger on top of it. I'm not sure which way our consultant's going to go yet, but every neighborhood's going to have these guys walking through them over the next probably 9 months.
And that's what I wanted you to do, is give a description of it, because when the public starts saying, what's going on, what are these people
Yep.
doing in my neighborhood, they're going to know now that what we're doing is locating the
Yep.
catch. Okay.
Yep. Moving forward to the snow account, which is a dump body replacement. We have a couple of older trucks. This will cover one of the older trucks with a new dump body. It gets rid of the stainless steel. Gets rid of the metal with a new stainless steel body. In the garage, we have no request for any expenditures. In traffic, I have a request for $215,000 for a signal upgrade. I have funds left over from the last 2 years. I'm looking to put a small bid package together with 3 signals, which would give us a better economy of scale for all of the work. We're probably going to be looking at the signals down on Cook Avenue that belong to the city. We'll probably be in that area, as well as the one on West Main and Centennial. Those are our 3 that are giving us the biggest problem at this time. Pavement markings, $90,000. This is to continue with the thermoplastic crosswalks, stop bars, lane lines, etc. I've gotten very good feedback from the residents because now you can physically see where they are supposed to be on the road. It's been a very good program that we've been doing for several years. Hang on. Okay, in the highway department, looking for a new dump truck. This has been a standard request for about 11 years now. It's paying off. We've been able to buy Peterbilt's, which is now allowing us to stockpile their parts, and it's reducing some of our other inventory because we can now go and grab the same piece of equipment for so many trucks. I have, I think it's 13 of them on the street now. Last is a mid-size backhoe. This is slightly larger than a Mini and smaller than what we currently have. I have what's called a John Deere 710. It's too big for the street. It was purchased probably about 15 to 20 years ago. In my personal opinion, it should not have been purchased. It's too large for the streets. So we're looking at something a little bit smaller. This will actually mimic what the water department uses, and it's a great little machine to walk around the city with. That will help me with the catch basin replacements, doing the storm drainage repairs that I need to do, and any pavement repairs where I'm excavating the highway out and putting in new base. And those are all the requests that I have.
Thank you. With regard to a CIP project that was in the 2012-13 budget, I believe, it was the drainage work that needed to be done on Boylston Street. Typically, when we see things that either get rejected for one reason or another from the council standpoint, however, the staff feels as though that this is a necessary project that needs to be done, we see it brought up at some point in the next couple of years to be included in the CIP. Bob, you and I exchanged some emails earlier this year with regard to the Boylston Street project.
Yes.
Where plans are about 90% complete, but nothing has been revisited since that 2012, 2013 year, and residents and neighbors in that area are calling me saying, hey, we were promised something was going to be done. Where does this project stand? So my question to you is, not seeing it in your CIP this year, what your thoughts are on that project?
After you and I had exchanged some emails, my staff and I went out and we did a little bit of walking through the area, and we also did some additional survey, and it came to our attention that the inlet structure, which is located just behind the steakhouse, is about 2 inches higher than the level of the water in the area immediately north of American Steakhouse. What we are doing is we are going to take that inlet out. We're going to take the drainage out that goes to the first basin in the parking lot. We're going to actually be able to lower that. We have sufficient grade. That should drain that area north of the restaurant and should solve those problems, because from what we can see with that water ponding there, it's causing that problem all the way back heading towards the north. We're going to be able to do that in-house. My guess is we're probably going to spend $4,000, $5,000 to do that, versus the plan that was put together by one of the consultants many years ago, which had a price tag of about $600,000. So we think we have found an effective low-cost solution. Can I promise that it will solve every ounce of water that might be sitting up there? No, but I think that the residents will find a significant improvement once we put this in, and that is on our radar to do this summer.
That was my last question. Thank you very much.
Anything else from Mr. Bass? Councilor Burnett?
I'm looking for what is your overall budget cost this year, and what was it last year? I'm trying to look at a slide or something that says exactly what the percentage increase is for this year.
I don't have that number off the top of my head. Percent increase, I'm going to guess off the top of my head, 2% maybe.
Yeah, but that's a number I want to see. I don't want to hear a guess on percentages.
I can certainly get that. I wasn't expecting that question tonight. I probably should have been prepared for that, but I will.
It's always anybody that has like a 0% increase, they have a slide up there for it. Anybody that has anything proportionally bigger generally doesn't. So that's rule of thumb I've seen over the past 9 years. So just saying, I want to see what the increase is.
The increase is, the exact numbers of the department should be in the budget book, right? I mean, they're by department, so.
Yeah, it's by department, by area.
So so for Public Works, that's tab 10, is that right, Mr. Lefkus?
Yes, Department of Public Works is tab 10.
So
If
the budget numbers are all in there.
If Mr. Brunet would like, I can sit in the audience for a few moments. I can go through and work up the numbers, and I'll get back to you after Mr. Borden starts, if that's not a problem.
No, I think that's up to finance, actually, to get that information out.
Well, we have the information ready.
But it's broken down into several areas.
So we got Public Works,
Engineering, this,
we
that,
have
and
Public
the other.
Works, garage, and waste collection. And then we have the transfer station. So I'm not sure what numbers you're requesting, Councilor Bernay, that aren't already in our book.
Public Works as a whole, what was it total cost last year and what's the total cost this year? It's very simple.
Well, we have last year's budget because we're not done with last year, but go ahead, Mr.
But you know what
Lupkins.
I'm saying here.
Give me a couple minutes, I'll just have to take it off.
That's what I'm looking at.
And we have 2017 actual of 711,000.
My eyes aren't good enough for this anymore.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Well, what I'll do is I'll add it on here if you want to move along, and then
Oh, I was sure.
I'll jump back in.
Not a problem. All right.
There's no sense
So
of
we're just
urgency
answering
to
that
it.
number.
Just
Okay.
tomorrow.
Anything else for Mr. Bass? All right, Mr. Bass, you're
Thank you very much.
ready to go. All right, we're moving on to parks. Mr. Borden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, if you don't mind. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lupkus. I'm just going to highlight the key line items that I think there's changes in, and I'll start in the Parks Department, the 191, the overtime line item, and we're asking for an additional $15,000. And I just want to dispel, I think, the incorrect perception that it's due to the fact that our employees are maybe not working as hard as they can during the day to stay over to finish jobs. That is totally inaccurate. But I will tell you that, you know, it's pretty easy. Had $100,000 in that account this year, and 52% of that went to providing labor for 9 special events. And these are special events that the Parks Department does not run, but supports. So that's a big part of why we're looking for additional money, just to be accurate there.
Mr. Chairman, if you could, Chris, to the best of your ability, can you give me a summary of what those special events are?
Sure. The Daffodil Festival, and there are 2 food truck festivals, the Puerto Rican Festival, Nights in the City, National Night Out, Christmas in the Village, Special Day for Special People, Pet Fair, the Maloney High School Falcon Band Competition, and the Board of Education Spring Arts in the Park.
So some of those are actually part of the narrative
Yes.
under special events, which is a line item, but I noticed that some of them are not.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Some of them, they're all, pretty much what you can, some of them are directly run by city departments, like National Night Out is run by the police
Gotcha.
department. Other ones, like Christmas in the Village, it's kind of a quasi-city organization, so. But that's where the majority of this overtime budget goes to.
Great, thank you.
All right? In the,
Just to be clear, the Christmas in the Village is not a city organization. That's
correct.
clear, that is not a city organization. Go ahead.
Okay. The 345 line item, historically, that's been funded at $75,000. The previous city manager wanted to combine $30,000 that we got for getting the Meriden Green into that, so that was at 105 last year. That $30,000 has now been moved down to the 645 line item, and that's just to give a more accurate representation of how much it does cost to maintain the Meriden Green. We are asking for an increase in a 345 line item, and that's kind of like our catch-all that pays not only for materials and supplies, but also things like our uniform service that we're mandated to do. And, we do think that if we overrun in other line items, particularly in the 352 vehicle maintenance line item, that, ends up coming out of here. So we're just trying to be accurate in what the costs are of doing the job responsibilities we have now. All right, the 643 line item, that's something new I'm asking for this year, and that's for tree removal and replacement. And the problem that we're having is when we take down trees, if we have to take down a city tree that is more than 65 feet tall, we have to contract that out. That's the limit of what our bucket truck can reach. And just to give you an example, the tree next door at the Augusta Curtis Cultural Center, just for the crane service, for 3 days working on that, we did all the wood removal, cost $6,600. And we did 2 other big jobs this year, one on Hillcrest Avenue, one on Grove Road, they were additional $4,000. So that's roughly $11,000 out of a $75,000 line item. That's a big percentage. So that would just be something to accurately reflect, you know, where this money is going to, and certainly we would try, you know, not to go or keep it within the $10,000 for the year. So looking at all of our Parks Division line items, it's a non-salary increase of $27,000. I apologize, I don't have the figure as to what the increase from last year, but already that is driven by salaries, which, as you know, department heads, we do not have any control over. Continue on, recreation?
No, that's fine, but the percentage is calculated at the bottom at 6%, right? Yeah, so the departments are not just putting up slides when it's only 0. They put up whatever the numbers are, they're transparent, and now we're on to recreation.
Okay, and the recreation,
Overall budget, one slide at a time.
recreation line item, two things I want to point out. And the first is a 192, that's the non-union wage line item that basically accounts for our part-time employees, lifeguards, counselors. And that's been at $130,000 for at least the past 4 or 5 years. The past 2 years, we've gone over in that. And we were kept at $130,000 this year, which I understand, and we are going to cut back service. So, for instance, our summer playground program will go from 7 weeks to 6 weeks, and the public pool at Hubbard Park will go from being open 7.5 hours to 6 hours a day. And those are changes, you know, I'm kind of already implemented. I don't see any problem with that, but that's just trying to stay within the number given to us. The 443 line item is for fireworks, and the problem with fireworks is that because it is takes place, Independence Day fireworks takes place.
Counselors, we have a presentation. If you want to speak, you can certainly go outside. Otherwise, please listen to the presentation.
You can refer that to someone.
I'm referring to whoever's speaking.
All right, so.
Okay. So
I would appreciate if you don't mention my name unless if it's me. If it's me, I will tell you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 443 line item is for the Independence Day fireworks. And traditionally what happens is it doesn't get approved in the budget, and then it becomes a big issue in mid-June, and there's a big fundraising push to get the fireworks in, and it makes it difficult for us to secure a proper launch date. We were very lucky this year that we had a cancellation. Otherwise, we would have been doing it a week after the 4th of July because we were that late in the game. So, you know, I do think it's not an easy decision for the council to make whether to do the fireworks or not. It is a sizable chunk of money for a relatively short display. I understand the patriotic value in doing it, but I would just say if you make that decision one way or the other, it would benefit the department to do that decision now as opposed to doing it in mid-June. All right, and that's basically the only non-salary increase in the recreation division is at $20,000.
And Mr. Gordon, just to echo your concerns on the fireworks, in fact, it was, I forgot how many years ago, that the council specifically decided to pull it out and make it its own separate line item for that very reason, that it wasn't just stuck under some random events or special events line item. It was because of the size of it, the city council should really make a decision one way or another at budget time, whether it's going to be in there or not, and that's how it became a separate line item. So I concur with
Correct.
your urge for a decision one way or another on that. Building maintenance?
Building maintenance, okay. The majority of the line items will stay the same. The big increase is in the 412 line item, and that's for materials and supplies. And basically, as repairs and supplies, and I'm sure Peter can attest to this, building maintenance has almost doubled the amount of buildings that they are responsible for. And what we are trying to do, instead of contracting most of these repairs out, is to do it in-house. The Parks Division has 2 very competent carpenters. Peter has an HVAC person. And what we'd like to do is kind of build a team, you know, not through adding anyone on, but as we do have openings through retirement, to getting a plumber, an electrician, and basically be able to do all these, you know, internal repairs in-house instead of going out. And the increase, like I said, we're doing things now that we haven't done before. We've basically taken over the 5 fire stations, doing the repairs in there. We're going to be responsible for doing the 2 historical houses, which both need a lot of work. So that is where that increase is going, and that's just about $27,000.
Thank you. From a facilities standpoint, do we ever look at partnering in any ways with the Board of Education on utilizing either some of their staff or some of their equipment or vice versa?
Historically, we've only done that at locations that we have a dual interest in, such as Falcon Field. But we've never said, like, you know, for the Parks building, can we borrow your electrician? You know, we've done that, like I said, up at Falcon. We had some issues at the Maloney Band competition this year where a pole got a transformer blew, and it was a joint effort with the Board of Ed providing the electrician to do the initial diagnose. But no, it's not. We don't share unless we have that dual interest.
So if there was a Soul City building or structure that needed an electrician and we didn't have one, what would happen?
Either 2 things. The Public Utilities Department does have an electrician that Director Waz is very good in lending them out, but the problem being that, you know, he's got a full plate too. And I understand what you're saying. If we had like one unit that just did repairs across the city, that idea looks good in paper. I just think it would be more difficult to implement to fairly, you know, fairly job out what they're doing.
Okay. Thank you.
Chief Morgan.
We do have electricians also in the Public Works Department. The Signal Division has three, I believe, that we've used for projects in the past to avoid having to go out to contract or go to contractors. And they're real good about getting the smaller jobs done. Bigger jobs kind of get tough with them because they're still running all the street lights, or signal lights and the alarm system. But we do have some electricians that we use in-house.
Councilor Batista.
Chris, where's, for some reason I'm not on the right page, with regards to the historic houses that you and I have been discussing, where is that? What line? You
That's
said it
going
was
to be
on-
in the 412, in the building
412.
maintenance 412 line item.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I know we had talked about that before. And though, just so that everyone knows, council knows, and the public understands that, those 2 buildings are really on the verge of, I don't know how they're standing, I don't know how the roofs are standing or being maintained, and Chris is doing all he can with regards to that. Those are historic houses. What are you doing? Put the camera on here. Those are historic houses, and I've been to both. They're operated by volunteers completely, 100%. But those volunteers can't put money in to fix the electric when it's down. They can't put money in to fix the leaks in the roof, particularly the Solomon Goff House. And those buildings are an embarrassment because they're city buildings, and they've been neglected far too long. Just a comment. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Jelks has joined us. Do you have anything else before we go to CIP? All right,
If there's any other questions.
let's go to CIP. This is on page 13-2. And Mike, do these guys cover both facilities and parks and recreation on that page? Is that right? Or is- Or is it just Parks and Rec?
Okay, we'll start with the park and recreation ones,
Okay.
and you can see we only have 3 in this year. The first is for a pickup truck replacement, which really has to do with our efforts in the snow removal process. We have a truck that is going on over 10 years old, that's done a lot of hard miles doing plowing, and now kind of serves as what we call a shovel crew. It goes around with snow blowers and does sidewalks. It does not have a lift gate, so we're looking to do two things, is to get a more reliable truck and also get a lift gate, which will drastically improve the safety for our employees that have to get the snow blowers in and out of that truck. The second item for Parks Building and Grounds improvements, we have multiple projects just within the park system that need to be done that our operating budget really can't sustain. Chief among them are the increase in garage space we need at the Hubbard Park Maintenance Facility. Since we've gotten the Meriden Green, we have received numerous new tractors, we've got a compressor, we have all this new equipment, and we are stretched to the max of the capacity at Hubbard Park, and we're even stretched up at Seppa Field, which is our secondary storage area. So we do want to add on new garages there to be able to keep all the equipment up at Hubbard Park. And then there's probably about 10 other projects spread throughout the park system. At Nessing Field, the flagpole retaining wall and area needs to be redone. Carroll Park has a sidewalk that's caved in that we need to do. Falcon Field, we're looking to put on another storage room there on the field house. So there's multiple things there that, as I said, just our operating budget cannot sustain. And then the Tower Road rehab, we did do a section of the road earlier this year that was on the eastern shore of Miramere Reservoir, and that came out very good, drastically improved that area. But there's an area further up near where the Maloney Canal intersects with the road. It's just before you start the rapid ascent up the mountain. And there's a part of the road that is actually caving in. If you drive it, you'll know it immediately. So that one day will completely collapse. And I don't know if that's a year from now, 5 years from now, but when it does, that's gonna curtail access to both East and West Peak. And East Peak obviously with residents and other citizens visiting Castle Craig, that would be not a good situation. And then, contractually, we do have people that need to get up to West Peak for the radio tower. So that's something we're just trying to be proactive and get it done before we're forced to do it.
Anything else?
Not on parks facilities? Facilities, we have 5 projects this year, highlighted by the cell block upgrades that need to be done at the police station, and that stems from a lawsuit against the police department, and also the replacement of a hangar or a Quonset hut at the airport, something that desperately needs to be done. The other projects involve HVAC replacement at Engine 5 for the fire department. If you've ever been in the basement there, that's not a, if you ever saw the sump pump area there, that's not a particularly good situation. That needs to be improved. Pavement repairs at the fire stations, and an elevator modernization at the police department. The elevator there is not reliable at all.
Any questions? All right, do you have anything else?
Nothing.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have nothing else. We have nothing else on the agenda. The next meeting will be April 5th. We will be doing the police department, and Chief Morgan and Mr. Lepkus, if there are any departments that have to come in for any particular CIPs, otherwise I'll assume the two of you. I'm sorry?
April 4th for health?
I'm sorry, April 4th at 5:30 is the Health and Library. That's next Wednesday. April 5th is Police and whatever remaining CIP. And then April 9th is the public hearing for comment That is at Maloney High School at 5:30 PM. Again, it's Monday, April 9th. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye.